Welcome to the Great Basin Prescribed Fire and Smoke Transport Briefing for Monday, March 24th. Currently, we have prescribed fire ongoing across the Great Basin, especially over northern areas and over parts of Utah, with a few in Nevada. Over the last 7 to 14 days, we've continued to see some moisture move across the Great Basin, mainly up north, with a spattering down in parts of eastern Nevada and Utah. And you can see over the last 2 weeks here on the right, these areas have been just above normal for the time of year. Some drier spots continue to be southern Utah, southern Nevada, and western and northwest Nevada especially. Looking at new snow over the last 24 hours, or the last 72 hours, you can see there has been some new snowfall up in central and eastern Idaho and Wyoming and down into the mountains of Utah. However, amounts have been fairly modest and generally under a foot. The snow depth is indicated on the right, and you can see, comparing it to normal, most areas over the northern two-thirds of the Great Basin are near to just above normal. Some exceptions are parts of the Sierra that are just below normal, and then also southern Utah and the Arizona Strip and parts of southern Nevada remain below normal, although certainly not as far below normal as they were a few weeks ago. Looking at our current drought conditions, this is our short-term drought, our evaporative demand drought index, and you can still see some drought signatures even in the short term as well as the long term over the southern half of the Great Basin, where things have certainly been drier over the last several months. Looking at our satellite loop from this morning, you can see a ridge of high pressure building into the California coast, and this is pushing into the Great Basin with clear skies over much of Nevada. However, over the top of the ridge, we continue to have some moisture in Idaho with clouds and just a few showers, and also into Wyoming. This ridge will continue building across the Great Basin with some very warm temperatures on tap for the next several days. Looking at later this afternoon, you can see the ridge is centered over the western half of the Great Basin. Again, those clouds and maybe a few light showers in the far north, otherwise dry conditions and warming temperatures. Under this ridge, we'll continue to see lighter winds with poor dispersion, especially across Nevada. There will be some areas of southern and eastern Idaho into Utah that have some northwest wind flow on the east side of the ridge that will keep dispersion just a little bit higher. Looking at the transport winds, again, generally very light winds in Nevada under the ridge, and then you are seeing some northwest wind gusts in the teens or 20s over parts of Idaho and Utah, which again will help improve that dispersion and air quality. However, up into western Wyoming is where the strongest winds in the geographic area are, where we will see some westerly to northwest winds above 30 miles per hour. Mixing heights will remain generally high with the exception of the far north. And temperatures today will continue to warm. We will see temperatures in the 60s and 70s over much of the northern half of the Great Basin in the lower elevations, and this is about 10 to 15 degrees or so above normal. We'll see highs in the mid-80s down south. Otherwise, relative humidity with these warm conditions under the ridge will remain below 15% in the south and still above 20% over much of the north. As we move into Tuesday, the ridge continues to build eastward, and this will continue with warmer and drier conditions and lighter winds, so generally poor dispersion across much of the eastern half of the Great Basin. Could see a little bit better dispersion as some southwest winds develop on the west side. And you can see that in the transport winds, still very light no matter how you slice it, but we will have some gusts in the teens over western areas of the Great Basin, which may improve some dispersion briefly, and then very poor conditions over the eastern half of the Great Basin with high mixing heights. Temperatures continue to warm. We'll see highs generally in the 70s in all low elevations, even some areas getting up to near 80 degrees in western Nevada, and then near 90 degrees down south. Again, this is at least 20 degrees, if not more, above normal for the time of year, especially over the northern half of the Great Basin. Relative humidity remains low in the south with some areas below 10%, and then gets into the teens up into western Nevada, and even some teens up into southwest Idaho. On Wednesday, the ridge continues to push eastward, and we do have an area of low pressure moving into the northwest coast. Still dry conditions expected across much of the geographic area on Wednesday. However, we will see winds start to improve and increase and improve dispersion over Nevada and even parts of Utah. And you can see that in the transport winds. We are starting to see some of those gusts above 30 or 40 miles per hour on Wednesday, although Thursday will be our strongest wind day over western Nevada. Mixing heights continue to rise as this system continues to approach, so high mixing heights expected region-wide. And Wednesday, really Tuesday through Thursday, is when temperatures peak depending on the area of the Great Basin, but Wednesday overall will be one of our warmest days, again with temperatures over 20 degrees above normal. Relative humidity remains low with even, again, decreasing a little bit more as we move through the day on Wednesday. 3-day precipitation, you can see just a few showers up in central Idaho today with that moisture that's spilling over the ridge, and then this area in the Sierra will be on Wednesday as that next storm approaches. But as you can see for the Great Basin, generally dry conditions. Thursday is where we start to see things begin to change. We will see temperatures cooling over the western half of the Great Basin as this trough moves in, along with some cloud cover and increasing winds to improve dispersion region-wide. Then on Friday, continue with that moisture. We'll see scattered showers really over the northern half of the Great Basin as we go later this week, along with gradually cooling temperatures from west to east. And this will continue into the weekend. This system moves well to the east, but we do have another system approaching for the weekend with more wet weather. So although we are seeing very warm and dry conditions for the first half of the week, we will return to our stormier weather pattern, bringing cooler temperatures and showers and areas of precipitation going into the end of the month into the early part of April. Precipitation accumulation, this is just for Thursday through Friday night, and you can see we will start to see some moisture, especially later in the week, move across the Great Basin, but even looking at amounts, still fairly light. So not expecting any significant precipitation, certainly no significant additions to the snowpack, especially due to the time of year. As we move into the weekend, this is where the stronger storm approaches for bringing significant precipitation to the Sierra. So we will have some good snowfall amounts, but also some rain in the lower elevations and lowering snow heights. And then the 7-day total precip, taking everything into account, you can still see the southern third of the Great Basin remains dry even as the storms begin to move back into the region. Most of that precipitation will be focused over the northern half of the area. Again, we are expecting some stronger winds as these systems begin to return later this week and going through the weekend, so something to watch out for. The 8 to 14-day outlook, taking us from March 31st through April 6th, shows, again, cooler temperatures and wetter conditions moving into the west. So again, although we're seeing some drier, warm conditions, we will see that return of a more active storm track, mainly targeting western and northern areas of the Great Basin, but we could see some lighter showers in the far south. But still, there will be likely some areas of the southern Great Basin that will be entirely missed yet again. That concludes the webcast for today. Check back on Wednesday for the latest updates.